Welcome to the Peace and All Good podcast. I'm your host, Shelley Roeder, and today I'm very pleased to introduce you all to Dawn Jones and Tamara Remington, who came to know the Franciscan Peacemakers through their extensive careers in law enforcement. And so law enforcement being part of the community that Franciscan Peacemakers connects with in order to holistically look at this issue of human sex trafficking and how we can best heal the community and the people impacted. So I would like to just have Dawn and Tamara introduce themselves with how they came to know Peacemakers and then what they're doing now in the world. So Dawn, how about you?
So in 2007, I was a detective at the Milwaukee Police Department, and I was assigned the Human Trafficking Task Force. And at that time, we collaboratively worked with several different advocacy groups, and Franciscan Peacemakers was one of them. So I've worked with Deacon Steve for well over a decade and a half and continue to work with him now. I retired after 25 and a half years of law enforcement and had worked on trafficking for approximately 10 years as an investigator, and continued a little bit after that with my supervision as a lieutenant. I also had the first arrest and conviction for state sex trafficking in Wisconsin. And
what year was that, Dawn?
2008. I hit the ground running. Within my first 2 weeks, I had 3 cases open in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I was told back then that they were told that we didn't have it in Wisconsin, sex trafficking, that is. And I told them that nobody told me that, and I have 3 cases with them. So I opened the cases up, and we had our first conviction, or first arrest in 2008. I think he actually took a plea in 2009. And the first state sex trafficking was charged in 2009 because the first state statute was implemented in 2008. Now I work as a volunteer advocate. I'm the chair of the Human Trafficking Task Force. And I'm still trying to save the world and still working with Franciscan Peacemakers and many other advocacy groups.
Yeah, it just wasn't a couple weeks ago that Deacon Steve got contacted by a survivor in Washington County, and you happened to be in Singer and happened to be able to be there to help facilitate a process of getting her away from her trafficker.
It's very nice to be able to collaboratively work. The system works so well. And I can't say enough about Franciscan Peacemakers and Deacon Steve. There was one time I had a victim that it was Thanksgiving, and she wanted to get out of the lifestyle, and she was addicted to heroin, and I called Deacon Steve up and I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, "I'll be there in 45 minutes. Didn't even hesitate. So to have somebody like that on your team is the way that we're able to combat human trafficking.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Tamara, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your background with the Peacemakers and in law enforcement.
I was in law enforcement for 24 years. I actually started off in San Jose, California at San Jose PD. Was a gang detective out there, and I thought human trafficking was an international problem. And it took me moving to small town Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where I became a cop and a school officer in Sheboygan. And the kids of the high school opened my eyes and said, human trafficking is going on right here in Sheboygan, right downtown. And sure enough, they educated me in 2009. We had our first case. I became a detective at Sheboygan Police Department, and we had our first case in 2012. I thank Dawn Jones, who was at Milwaukee PD. Basically, she and her partner took me under their wing and guided me through my first case. And I met Franciscan Peacemakers shortly after that. I got to know Deacon Steve, did some presentations with him and a survivor, and really, as Dawn said, can't say enough positive things about Franciscan Peacemakers and Deacon Steve for all of the help. I mean, they were one of our greatest resources to turn to as we did recover so many survivors of this. I mean, at the time, 2012, 2013, as Dawn said, I mean, there were a lot of people saying this isn't going on in Wisconsin. Actually, it's in all 72 counties. So I joined the federal task force in 2013 and just started working all the cases here in Sheboygan County. I retired last year, and my current, I'm doing corporate security, but they're very huge supporters of the community, and they allow me to have time off to go do a lot. I used my time to volunteer, went to the Pro Bowl and Super Bowl with some teams, and we recovered 32 people down at the Super Bowl this year. So just very grateful to have had the opportunity to work with Franciscan Peacemakers and with Dawn.
Yeah, thanks. So even after retirement, you're still involved in this issue too. So this leads me to the one question Deacon Steve wanted me to ask you, which is, why do you care so damn much about these women? I quote Deacon Steve. I'm not swearing, Mom. It's Deacon quoting. But yeah, do you have any stories, I guess, that really speak to that, the compassion that you have to continue to dedicate time even after your retirement from law enforcement to this issue?
Well, I would say that as law enforcement, I received more as a human being from these victims and the roads they traveled and the obstacles that they overcome than they could have ever received from me. And they made me a stronger and better person. And it made me realize how fortunate I am and how much is needed to help them get on the path that they need to get on or want to get on or desire to get on. And as a Christian, how can you not assist them in doing that?
Thanks. And Tamara, how about you? Why do you care so damn much?
Like Dawn said, I mean, these are some of the best and brightest. After working with so many survivors over the years, they truly were an inspiration. Like I said, some of the best and brightest. And I see society labeling and making assumptions and judgments. And I learned so much from them. They are some amazing individuals. And I realized that anybody can become a victim of human trafficking. The one thing that all of the victims that I worked with had in common was vulnerability, and that's all humans at some point. I was vulnerable years ago when I got divorced. I mean, all humans. And so this is something, even as law enforcement, I would train law enforcement and point out, hey, it can happen to anyone. It happens to males, females, all ages. We have victims 2 to 72 and everything in between, all shapes, all sizes, all races. And so the other thing, I had people judging people's families, victims' families, and I pointed out, again, it's the whole spectrum. We have some very amazing families, supportive families that are out there looking for their kids and family members as well. So it really was seeing that judgment by society as a whole. So I was really getting out there, volunteering a lot of time doing presentations. I got into all the schools of around the area, middle schools and up, elementary schools, to talk to the teachers and parents. And really working with a lot of the high-risk kids, the runaways. And then I'll never forget, there was a 12-year-old that I gave, a one-on-one talk with. Kind of the presentation summed up to her. And she was spinning around on her chair, rolling her eyes. I thought, oh no, this kid isn't listening. Thank God that 12-year-old listened, because fast forward to when she's 14, she's the kid walking downtown Sheboygan, 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, my favorite time of the week, broad daylight, and was approached at Fountain Park by a guy and a girl in a car, and they knew that they had 5 minutes to kind of get her in the car. She recognized what was happening and got a good look at the guy, a good look at the girl, a good look at the car, ran away, called 911, and uncovered a human trafficking ring. And we played that 911 call at the jury trial. There were no dry eyes, and defense asked her, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "I'm crying for two reasons. Had I not heard the message, the prevention, the awareness message, when I was 12, I would have got in that car. And second of all, I'm crying because had I got in that car, my life would forever be changed." So just hearing that and working with all the different survivors, and they're just the most giving people who want to help others, right, Dawn?
That's right, absolutely. One of my survivors said to me, when I asked her, I said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And she said, "First, nobody's ever asked me that." Because many of the victims believe that there is no future. This is what they're made for, and this is what they have to do, whether they like it or not. And they don't believe that they are worth anything more. And then I said, "You could be anything. What do you want to be when you're old like me?" And she said, "I want to be a nurse." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And she said, "Because when I was in the hospital getting treatment and I was handcuffed and my nose was running, the nurse is the only one that would wipe my nose. I want to help others the way they help me." And that just really, and I have had many survivors become nurses and CNAs and physical therapists and community activists.
Yeah, almost like being able to have the experience of being served in that way leads them to, wanting to serve other people, recognizing the ways in which it impacted their life. That is really powerful. And we see that definitely with the women that come through the Peacemakers program, the Clare community, the women that just feel so blessed to have this opportunity to work with an organization that's out there working with women who are living the life they used to live. What are some of the stereotypes of survivors or their families that you would like to debunk?
I think that they want to do this. Even if they say they want to do this, they don't want to do this. This is not something that one day a young girl wakes up and says, "Hey, I want to be involved in prostitution and I want to do this for the rest of my life." That when they say they're okay, they're not okay, and they don't realize that it's okay to not be okay. And that there are people out there that are willing to help them get out of that lifestyle and get them back on their track. Many of them are not addicted to drugs or even use drugs. We have a lot of juveniles where that's an overhead for the trafficker. It's harder to control them when they're on drugs, and it's harder to get them to do what they want them to do. Where you'll see the drug addiction is further down the line when now that trafficker no longer wants them and passes them off to another trafficker, or they're trying to survive. And because they endured all that trauma, they turn to different coping mechanisms, and sometimes that is drugs, sometimes it's alcohol, and it's a matter of survival. This is not something that they wanted to, and I think the biggest thing I would like to stress is when people talk about prostitution being the oldest profession, we all know when women had the right to vote. We did not have the right to do a lot of things, including charge a man to violate our bodies. So if you're talking about the oldest profession, it's going to be trafficking, not prostitution.
That is a really, really profound and insightful perspective, that the crime isn't prostitution, it's the trafficking. It's someone who's exploiting the body of someone else. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. It's I think as a woman in this culture, sometimes you're swimming in the culture so much, it's like you're a fish in water and you can't see the water around you. And that's how it feels a little bit with like the objectification of women, right? That like not until the Me Too movement, I think, really helped to bring this to light, that like women shouldn't have to endure harassment, just like people making passes at them being acceptable. That's not acceptable, right? The agency that we have over our bodies is something that's kind of a emerging consciousness, right? And so, I mean, even to hear that the first statute for sex trafficking in Wisconsin was 2008 is astounding to me at how new this concept is. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. That's a really insightful piece of information. Tamara, what about you? What are the stereotypes of survivors or their families that you would want to debunk or just, bring some truth to?
Again, that they choose this, that they want this, that they seek this, and that they are dumb. That really upsets me. Another thing, I had a case where a lady called 911 and said, "I can't get out of here. If I step out, this trafficker is going to kill me." The patrol guys got there and they said they brought her to me and they said, "Hey, Remington, the door was wide open. She could have left if she wanted to. Surely she wanted to stay. She wanted to be there." No, she didn't. She was manipulated to believe that if she stepped foot out of that open door, she would be killed or her family would be hurt. So all of the manipulation, this is something that we really, it took a while to really learn about that. And the PTSD that the survivors live with, and all the different, how they can disassociate. Sometimes too, when they speak to us as investigators, it may appear to law enforcement that they are lying, but they truly are recalling, from different, and they're traumatized. There's major traumas. So I think it really is a huge part. It's very important for law enforcement, for everyone dealing with survivors, to realize the immense trauma.
Yeah, and as I understand it, the way that impacts the brain, the way that the brain and the body really work together to escape that trauma in the moment is through dissociation. So you might have a memory of something that didn't actually happen because your brain was taking you to a place where you felt safer, right?
Yes. And they say too that the closest thing to human trafficking survivors, the brain scans, it's people in concentration camps. I mean, that's the closest it comes with the brain scans. And I do believe that the trauma is immense, and it does, and we have to realize that and be compassionate, and also non-judgmental and sincere. I know, and trust is the biggest thing, especially for law enforcement. It's so important to, first of all, have officers that are trained. Anybody who's working with survivors needs to be trained, but also to be sincere and non-judgmental, and to develop that trust. That's huge. Without that, you're not going to help the survivors get their resources, hook them up with Franciscan peacemakers and such to get help, and also to, for the cases. So just,
Mm-hmm.
Tamara brought up a really good point, because the perception in their head, they're controlled psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times to law enforcement, it does not make sense. And being able to understand the trauma is extremely important. And the other amazing point she brought up, because she's an amazing person, that's just how it is. I had to step up my game when she got involved. Is the fact that we as law enforcement don't always understand trauma. So when we're asking a question, we like it in chronological order. We want it exact, to the point, to the detail. But we of all people should understand trauma. If there's an officer involved shooting or incident, they will often take a really brief statement from you, and then they'll give you a day or two to decompress and get your faculties together, because we know that in trauma situations, the memories don't go in the right place. They go into all different parts of the brains, and we're trying to figure out what happened. So they're not going to give it to you in chronological order, and things are going to be out of place, just like they would in an officer-involved shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start explaining that to them, I think a light bulb goes on. They're like, oh, that makes sense. A trafficking victim, when I take a statement, it's all over the place. And I let them talk all over the place because they're going to miss a memory. and we can go back later and try and sort things out. But if you don't give them that time, you will miss valuable pieces of information and evidence, trying to make them and their brain work in a matter that it's not made to work in.
Yeah. That leads me to a question around how justice for survivors happens. Like, what are all the pieces that need to be in place for justice to happen? What are the challenges, I guess, towards achieving justice? Sounds like that's one of them, right? Law enforcement being able to have the training to get the story, to build the relationship of trust, to piece it together, to understand the complexity of the issue given brain trauma that's happened for the survivor, right? But what are the other obstacles towards achieving justice for survivors?
Well, that's a tricky question, because just because you hold a offender accountable and they're arrested doesn't mean that the victim actually gets justice. And they can live with that trauma and those emotions for the rest of their life and never receive justice. In order to get them as much as our system can get them is definitely law enforcement listening and investigating, and knowing how. I think we're kind of back at step one, where we need to retrain our officers again, because we've had so many retirements and such a new group of officers and different ideas and perspectives of what human trafficking is and how to investigate it. I think we need to go back in time to 2007 when we started this. So we're able to find them some peace and help them recover. Definitely collaboration with different resources is huge. If we don't have that, we will often lose our victims and our survivors, because they need assistance. And if the only one that is readily able to give them assistance is the trafficker, even if it's just food or shelter, then that's where they're going to go, because their survival mode kicks in. We also need prosecutors to understand exactly how the trauma works and what's needed for a good prosecution. And I think more importantly, we need the judges to understand that if we have a 14 and a 17-year-old victim and you go through jury trial and he's convicted of trafficking both of them, that it's not the 14-year-old's fault, even if she gets on the stand and says it. And this person should be receiving more than 5 years in prison. And that happened. And that's for the 17-year-old was in tears, because here she knows how much she's been violated and what this person did to her, and he got 5 years in prison. And that's ridiculous. Should not even be considered as a plea bargain. And so when you talk about justice, just because there's prosecution, it doesn't mean that there's justice that goes along with it.
Yeah, and a question I'd have is, how often is there even prosecution? Is it, I mean, that's not super common, right?
So I know in Sheboygan, we're very lucky. We have a district attorney who takes he took all the cases that I brought forward to him. I worked with detectives all over the state, and we had some really solid cases. These cases, are very transient too. I mean, they go all over states and within the state, involving multiple jurisdictions. And how many counties, how many prosecutors are not taking these cases. They are challenging. They are time consuming. They are very, it's a very big challenge to take on these cases. So we were lucky here that we have a district attorney who takes all the cases, building that good relationship with the federal, the U.S. attorneys as well, building relationships with other departments, having Dawn Jones as my mentor, and really building a partnership with detectives all over America because these cases are so transient. I think another important thing is educating the whole community. So we hit Sheboygan at first. We had a lot of naysayers. You know, this, I don't see, it's modern day slavery. I don't see people chained and shackled. I don't see people in cages. I only ever had one case where a guy did put girls in a cage. It's very rare to do the physical shackles. What you see is the manipulation, the death threats, the drugging. So I think educating the community, because those are your future jurors as well. And as Dawn said, educating judges, prosecutors. But it was very important at our last jury trial. Do you know what? As we were doing the voir dire, picking the jury, how many of them had actually heard of human trafficking, either from our presentations through the community or at schools through their children went home and educated these people. Because as we said before, some of these stories are outrageous, and it's very hard to understand and believe that this really is happening in our town. So all of these things are challenges to justice.
That we missed?
I think it's important to realize even the little things that people do towards eradicating human trafficking is important. And you don't have to necessarily be on the front lines or get involved, but just a simple hello or smile at somebody, even if you think that there's something going on or not sure if there's something going on, kindness goes a long way. And it gives many victims hope. And to give them even a little bit of hope can save their life. So just keep that in mind.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I was at a gas station. You know, now whenever I go anywhere, I see people all the time that I think are being trafficked, right? That just goes along with the work, I think. But I was at a gas station and I saw a woman who was probably 18 to 20 with a man who was 45. They weren't related. They were different races. You know, it was just, and she was pretty beat up and looked like the ladies that we serve on the street, you know? And it is such a, like, how do you, like, I just want to take her aside and be like, here are all the numbers, here are all the people, you know? But all I could do in the moment, because I had a kid in the car and she was walking in, was just like make eye contact and smile, and you hope that they feel the sense of their own dignity and that they're seen, you know?
Absolutely. Being seen is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Each of us can make an impact on each other, and that can be positive or negative. And I did have a survivor. So this was the wildest thing. I actually called up one of our counseling leaders and for a trafficking counseling session of multiple girls. And I said, don't even bother coming up to Sheboygan this week. I said, we have girls in the hospital, in the jail, dozens of them. Two just overdosed and died. I was really like, are we even making a difference? Are we even? And I was sitting in my office, with a lump in my throat, just devastated that each and every one of our attendees was unable to attend for whatever reason. Okay. And just because the survivors are in jail, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, they're not, you know what I mean? It's this whole cycle. They're not criminals, but they're being criminalized. So anyway, all of a sudden the front desk called me and said, hey, Remington, there's someone here to see you. Well, I didn't have an appointment, and no one just drops into a detective. I mean, that's absurd. You know, it's a busy job. But I thought, well, I'll see who it is. I mean, this is unusual. And it ended up being a survivor from another county who was traveling through Sheboygan and stopped in to just meet me in person because we've talked. And she said, I just wanted to stop by and tell you, to meet you and to say, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. And I mean, it was at a time where, she was like an angel, truly, the timing. And then she told me, I said, she remembered how she got out of it. She was on the ground of a dirty motel. And she recalled the nurse that was kind to her. She recalled the cop that was nice to her. So all of those, like, she might recall the lady at the gas pump that said hi to her. Do you know what I mean? And it was that helped her, that made that change in her life and saved her life. And then she stopped by to come tell me, keep doing what I'm doing. That was God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what keeps you both hopeful and grounded?
My faith in God really keeps me grounded. And if I'm stressed out, I listen to Christian music all the time. When I'm in the car, I'll go for a bike ride and I'll listen to Christian music, and it brings me back. Though there might be a lot of people that are angry with God or don't have faith in God, find faith in something, because what happens is you realize how much you have when you see people surviving with so little and so much against them. And always focus on the good instead of the bad. The bad will come and go, but your good, you need to embrace it.
Thanks. And do you have any favorite Christian artists we should know about?
I love Lauren Daigle. That's probably my favorite Christian artist. Though there are so many amazing ones, that would be my number one.
Cool. Thanks. Tamara, how about you?
Definitely my faith is so healing after these kind of, especially when I was a detective and working these cases, people would say, well, how do you remain so positive and hopeful? But I almost felt that it was a blessing. I think God gave us the gift to take that and then give it over to Him, and He took it away. He would take away any of that stress. So through prayer, nature, I love being outside, gardening and planting and just being with nature, and I really feel at one with God. So really, without faith, I could not have made it. And I had one survivor. She did ask me, and it was difficult. Like in law enforcement, you just have to keep this, to yourself. And now it's nice to be retired. I can talk about it. But when I was a cop, I had one survivor say to me, "Hey, Remington, do you believe in God?" She actually asked me, so I could answer. I said, "Absolutely, without a doubt." My mom had just passed away, and I said, "Absolutely." And she said, "Thank you." She says, "Because I believe too." She says, "My defense attorney said, how could there be a God? How could there be so much negative and bad stuff happening to people, good people, if there is a God?" And I said, well, that's when God is the closest. That's when I really feel like when my mom passed away. I said that really is when He was the closest, when He is the closest. That's when you can find Him. Just reach out. So again, the faith, I'm Catholic and was, I just need Him.
Yeah. Deb Schneider and Wendy Smith were on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and they both commented how important faith is for the survivors to heal, right? And I think it's very true. Definitely for the women that we see in recovery, that spirituality is a big part of the recovery process. And I think too for the women like you who have dedicated your lives and your work to helping achieve justice for survivors, it's, you rely on faith because it's so difficult, right? And Dawn, I love that you say focus on the good, find the good, because our brains can be really good at focusing on the negative, right? And so that's what I really appreciate about spirituality, is it's this chance to kind of go against our human nature to focus on the negative and really try to find the good. And I just see so much good in both of you. So just a big thank you to the two of you for spending time on the podcast today, and also for all of the ways in which you've served the women that we serve and the Southeast Wisconsin region as it relates to this issue. From all of us who have kids and from all of us who care about our neighbors and our community, thank you for the ways in which you've contributed to the healing of our community. And before we go, we have one final question that's super important, because our listeners get a discount on your favorite Bath & Body product. So you have to name one specific Bath & Body product that you like the most from Franciscan Peacemakers.
I would say the coconut lime would be my number one.
Coconut lime. Do you like the soap, the lotion, the bath bombs?
Well, if they get a discount, I like it all.
I love it. Heard it here. Coconut lime. Great summer scent. It's like you're at the beach, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And Tamara, how about you?
Cherry almond lotion. Takes me back to my childhood. Smells just like when I was a kid.
Ah, cherry almond. Awesome. Thank you. Well, cherry almond lotion and coconut lime, the whole collection will be discounted 20% off with the code Tamara Dawn Pod. So that link will be in the show notes. But thank you both for Women of Valor. I love that that title. I think applies to both of you very, very much. So Women of Valor, thank you for being with us and for all of your work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.